Tonight's story is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction.
Who's gone? Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
And this is?
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Houston, we have a problem.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Now, where was I?
Welcome to a special episode of Blokebusters that I am tentatively calling NostalgiaBusters. And this inaugural episode, we're going to be discussing The Breakfast Club. And I'll get into what exactly this is going to be in a minute. But first, I'm going to introduce the guest for this episode. It is Paul Preston from themovieguys.net and the host of both Countdown to 5 and Ford Fiesta. How you doing, sir? Good to have you back.
This is the inaugural episode?
It is indeed, yes.
How exciting. I was unaware of that. All right, good. Yeah, well, look, you got a topic here that could go on forever, so happy to be aboard.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, great to have you back. For listeners of the podcast, you might recognize him from when we did El Camino, which is a fantastic film. Always fun talking about that. And yeah, I obviously... I've had this idea for a little while now, and I decided I would reach out and see if anyone was interested. And you were one of the first people to get back and suggest a film, so here we are.
Yeah, when you get into like movies that, could they be made today? It's kind of funny how Twitter has just kind of goofed on that whole concept at this point. It's like, could you make Blazing Saddles today? Which I'm sure you'll get to that one. I thought for sure I didn't know this was inaugural. I might have picked that because. I mean, funny's funny, but I'll get into that. But there's a whole bunch of tweets now that go around saying something like, Blazing Saddles couldn't make it today. Gene Wilder's dead. Or, hey, you couldn't make it today. They goof on the concept now, but there's still ample conversation to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times people focus on, and this is kind of the reason why I did it, people often focus on, the times have changed, and there are definitely some things that were accepted by the vast majority of people, and now that we have a deeper understanding of everything, and that we actually are trying not to insult a large group of people with some of our material, and it can be interesting to go back and have a look at some of these older films that, rightly so, are either cult classics or just genuinely great film, but look at it with the lens of, would this film be made the same today? Like, could you make the film
The other
today?
goof I remembered now is, could you make Blazing Saddles today? And someone said, well, everyone would just say, why did you do that? Mel Brooks already did. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's the South Park joke of Simpson did it. It's a lot of that. Yeah.
You think that's bad? Anyway.
But yeah, no, I've really wanted to do this for a while because I think there's a lot of fun that can be had just looking into this stuff. So thank you for agreeing to be on, and I do think this is a sort of a perfect first one to look into. Because obviously with something like Blazing Saddles, and as you say, we'll probably get to it, so I won't go too far in. But yeah, there's a lot in that would be open for discussion on this topic. Whereas I think a film like this, definitely there's a lot we can discuss, but yeah, I think it's a good starting point for this type of discussion. So first of all, just to do the nuts and bolts, because I normally do that at the start. Directed by John Hughes, and if you don't know who John Hughes is, I can't really help you at this point. He's he was a prolific director and did a whole bunch of the sort of 80s comedies. A couple of others may end up being on this very series as well. And a reported budget of $1 million, and a box office, depending on where you look, it was a domestic box office of $45,875,171 US dollars, and a worldwide of $51,525,171 American dollars.
Wait, so that's like a $6 million difference between the domestic and the worldwide totals?
About that, yeah.
I get that.
Although
this doesn't exactly reach out to the rest of the world and ask for relevancy.
No, being set in a weekend detention in an American high school in the 80s, yeah, not a lot of worldwide appeal to that in general. Now, obviously, and we'll get into it, the film itself, you don't need to have gone to high school in the 80s to understand the film and to get it, but yeah, no, it's definitely a film that I think, if it were to be released in a more modern time, it would definitely be a more cult classic and get a lot of streaming and stuff like that over box office, I think. Now, the interesting thing was I tried to look up, using Box Office Mojo and so on, the information for this, and apparently there was a 2020 re-release. However, according to Box Office Mojo, that was in the Netherlands for one weekend. So I'm not 100% sure it can officially be called a re-release. So yeah, that domestic, that international.
If it happened in the Netherlands, did it happen? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was apparently it was only $13,000 made there. So yeah, I don't know. I am going based on all of the information I have available, and that was pretty much it. So. I guess my first question to you would be, why is it that you picked The Breakfast Club?
Well, I read a recent article by Molly Ringwald. She wrote it for the New Yorker magazine, and I encourage you, if you're listening to this and are interested in in how The Breakfast Club holds up over time, it's a favorite film of yours. She was pretty down on it. She wrote a whole article in the New Yorker about showing the film to her daughter and having lots of cringe-worthy moments while watching the film. That, I guess if you're her and you have a daughter and her specific situation says it. My specific situation does not see that at all. I, see this as a pretty relevant film today, and a lot of the things she brought up I take not issue with. She's welcome to her opinion and obviously lived through it all in a whole different scenario than I do, just being a guy who watched it. But as a guy who watched it, it plays better for me today than it did for her. So I recommend watching that. And so that sort of kicked me off down the trail of all sorts of other opinions online about this movie, and it just seems like it's really talked about in terms of it being of its era, but maybe not this one.
Yeah, I'll say it was interesting because you mentioned that you wanted a Breakfast Club, and it's been a film that ever since I first watched it, I just have really enjoyed the film overall. I've definitely gone back to it many times over the years, and as I was explaining to you before we hit record as well, like this film is 2 years older than I am, so much like The Goonies, it's of an era that I don't understand. I did not grow up in America. I didn't go to an American high school or anything like that. I was definitely not a teenager in the 80s. So, in terms of that, I have no connection to the film. However, what I would argue, and I don't know if you would argue the same, but I would hope so, is that the film is not specifically about that. It is almost entirely just about the band of characters in it really coming to realize ultimately that they're not that different. They all are struggling with the same thing despite being from those different areas of their society. And, coming to understand that whether or not that lasts after Saturday, we'll never know.
Film does. We don't know. Breakfast Club 2, I would not have a lot of faith in. If Hughes got behind it, maybe, but still, it's kind of like they've said the characters have said their piece to each other and for the camera, and now just sit on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I am not someone who would ever call for a sequel or anything like that. Like, potentially the only way I would accept it is if it was some sort of extended sketch in the style of the Wet Hot American Summer first day of camp, where like they come back and they're playing their characters and they just don't comment on how much older they are, and like it is like it's a year later or something like that, like, and it's clearly they're just having fun with it, and maybe it's only a 20-minute thing. I'd be fine with something like that, but
I worry they'd do it now, and then they would have kids, and now their kids are in the thing, and the tension. And I don't need that. I love Bender. I love Andy. I love Brian. I love the head case. I love Claire. They're the best. You fall in love with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that was kind of a good segue into my second question for you then, which would be, who is your favorite character in the film?
Here's the thing. Okay, so Molly Ringwald, one of the problems she had was when Bender ends up under the desk hiding from the principal, Vernon, right? And he looks up the skirt of Molly Ringwald's character, and he kind of moves in on it, and we cut away to her shock of, someone under the... I mean, she knows he's under there. They're hiding him because he was supposed to be in his sort of solitary confinement on the other side of the school. But then now in this article, she says that, she's very uncomfortable by that. She was basically sexually harassed by Bender, and to which I say, yes, he's the villain. He's a bad guy, and that's how you show that he's a bad guy. I mean, I can't see a situation where everyone goes, oh, Darth Vader's real problematic. He killed that guy by choking him right in the beginning. I'm like, yes, he's the bad guy. Bad guys got to be able to do bad guy things. The whole point of a movie is that you get to see fantasy situations where things play out that they wouldn't in real life to advance a story, to build stakes. I mean, obviously, Bender is a mess, and so they have to handle that through his monologues, through his backstory, and through his relationship with the other characters. That being said, to answer your question, he's my favorite. I love Bender. I love him so much. He's the greatest. He's hilarious. He's a huge jerk, but I mean, you can't stop watching him. Andy's the kind of Andrew is the kind of jock guy who would seem I don't know if I would trust in college, or even in high school. In both places, for me, when I was growing up, it was kind of like the art people versus the preppy types, and that would include like the quarterback as well as the prom queen. We were always sort of rebelling against it. We were kind of, as artists, we were kind of Bender. We just weren't as out to burn the world down. We were just sort of anti rich goofball. But we weren't Brian though, so we weren't quite brainiacs. There were a few Allisons among us, the basket case. But I think, Bender, we were kind of like Bender. And so I think I related a lot to him. But then, of course, the abuse and all that stuff he undergoes through from his parents, being burned by the cigarette and the stories he tells. I can't relate to any of that. But I find it high drama, a reason for why he is. And you got to let him be the bad guy and just see where that goes in the hands of a great writer. It went to fascinating places, I thought.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree that John Bender is by far the best character in the film. Obviously a major driving force for the plot in the film. Judd Nelson, I think, gives the best performances in the film. You've got all of these kids that were the Brat Pack, and they were doing exactly what they had been doing before. They were definitely falling into some of the stereotypes that they were already in, and getting typecast in those roles. Anthony Michael Hall, at this point in time, did he ever play anything other than a nerd? Yeah.
It's interesting because Weird Science, he was not like the nerd because he thought he was cool. He talked to the ladies. He dressed better than the usual nerd, but he still got shakes dumped on him and all that stuff. Like he couldn't quite get out of there until he grew up and got jacked, and then was in like Edward Scissorhands and the Dead Zone and stuff.
Yeah.
But But again, there was all good actors, I think, here.
Oh yeah.
But certainly with Nelson's role being the showiest, he certainly comes off as like, look at the great stuff he's doing here. But they all killed it. And Vernon and John Kaplos, who played the janitor. Such a great monologue and such great attitude in that film as well. So top notch across the board.
Yeah, and the interesting thing as well that I was kind of paying attention to during this rewatch that I had is that at no point in the film does Brian ever say that the janitor is not his dad. It's just that we see his dad pick him up at the end of the film. That's the only the only inkling we get that the janitor isn't his dad. But yeah, he doesn't deny it at any point. So it's kind of interesting.
True, you're right.
But to kind of circle back as well, Bender does indeed sexually harass Claire, and I can it's one of those things where in a more modern film, I feel like they would kind of hang a lantern on it a little bit and use it as either like a moment where everyone rallies against the bad character. But in this film set at this time, like in the reactions and everything, it genuinely is just that is what someone like Bender would have done. And everyone reacts the way that they would have done, and I don't see that there's an issue with the character doing that because he's messed up. He's acting this way, and I feel like by the end of the film you can kind of tell he's clearly acting this way because that's like he feels he has to. Like this is how
there are monologues that set up.
Yeah,
there are monologues that set up how his parents, every good therapist will tell you, tell me about your father, and clearly beats and burns him, and yells at his wife and goes there, tells him, go make a turkey pot pie, So there's lots of reasons for it. I mean, he didn't he wasn't just a jerk. There's reasons for it, and that stuff we have to examine just as much as we have to examine, Andy being instilled with the will to win from his father at all costs. They've all been just pressured by parents and by the school and by each other people. It's happening in that moment, like Claire's being pressured by Bender, tell us about, are you a virgin? Come on, tell us. What are you? He won't stop. He won't really. It's just a constant. That's what he was wanting to show. Is look at the pressure they're under when you drop them off, and you don't even, and you might think they're fine, or some of the better. So even some of the kids who have better parents, this is what they're dealing with at school. But So, but then of course, as you said before, there's stereotypes recognized here, and then how can people get past that is basically the story and realize that they're all kind of similar. Yeah,
and one thing I found interesting in kind of doing just a little bit of looking up stuff for this, there were almost weird casting, like obviously we know the cast now as these people, so obviously to then go, oh well, it could have been played by this person, and you just I can't think of it. Who could have been?
All right, go ahead, hit me.
But so let's see, Anthony Michael Hall appeared to just he was always going to be Brian, like that just was the case. So no need to worry about Brian. However,
John Hughes guy, and Molly Ringwald, I assume as well.
Molly Ringwald was asked to be in the film, but she was originally approached to play Allison.
Oh, interesting.
But she was apparently upset by that because she wanted to play Claire, who was being auditioned for with Robin Wright, Jodie Foster, Diane Lane, and Laura Dern. And then Ringwald actually just convinced Hughes to give her the part of Claire. So
run those names by me again.
So it was Robin Wright, Jodie Foster, Diane Lane, and Laura Dern.
who could have pulled that off? I think maybe Laura Dern probably best out of the bunch of them. Yeah, she's played a mess in Citizen Ruth and Half a Mess and Wild at Heart. I think she could do it.
I think Robin Wright could have done well with that. I don't think it would have been. It wouldn't have been the same. Absolutely wouldn't have been the same.
Because 2 years later, she comes off so posh as Princess Buttercup. It's like hard to imagine her getting down and dirty, but she could have. Yeah, I mean, she's so good. They were all good. Diane Lane was so good too.
Now, do you want to hazard a guess as to who was originally cast in the role of Bender?
Let's see, around that time, C. Thomas Howell?
Nope. No, not him.
Josh Brolin?
No. Although that's an interesting one. I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
So one more guess and then I'll tell you.
Jason Patric.
No, but another good pull. Yeah, I can see that. All right. So the the original cast for John Bender was Emilio Estevez.
Okay, from the other side of the room. Yeah, that's funny because Charlie Sheen probably would have been great.
I mean,
they should have had them both.
That would have been interesting.
It's interesting. They both look like their dad, but they don't look like each other. So they could have played people who aren't brothers in that movie just fine.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that like Emilio Estevez in this film looks like he's going to grow up to be Steve Carell. Like he's just got that kind of look to it. It's interesting. But yeah, so he was originally cast as Bender, but then Hughes was completely unable to find anyone to play Andrew. So he was then just recast as Andrew. And there were two other people other than Judd Nelson that were potentially going to be the role of Bender. And they were John Cusack and Nicolas Cage.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can actually see both of them doing that. I mean, yeah. Cusack's so likable, but he could turn up that dark side, I think. Just back then, it may not have... Yeah, he was so likable. Better Off Dead was that same year, I think, right?
I think so.
One Crazy Summer right around then.
And apparently Hughes did originally cast Cusack, but then replaced him with Nelson because he did not look intimidating enough.
And Cage, that just would have been a whole different movie. It would have been the Cage movie.
Yeah. It is very interesting to think of Nicolas Cage in literally any other role, like in any other film, because it's just like how can you wouldn't be able to dilute Nicolas Cage. It's not done.
Yeah, I went to see Renfield, and you have to go to his movies now. It's like, is it good? I was like, yes, because you have to see what he's going to do next.
Yeah,
that's kind of like when in Private Parts, when they said, why do people listen to Howard Stern? They want to hear what he's going to say next. Most of the people who listen to Howard Stern don't like it, but they have to tune in to see what he's going to say next. And so Cage is the same way. It's like, what wacky choice is he going to play as Dracula next? And the things he would have pulled out of his basket of tricks for Bender would have been nuts. Like he would have done tons of stuff, not in the direction. Would have just flown off the handle. It would have probably been amazing, but a different movie.
I can't imagine, like, as much as I would have enjoyed seeing Nicolas Cage being a version of Bender, I can't imagine Nicolas Cage giving the scene where Bender is imitating everyone's home life. Like, I can't picture that in any fraction.
Oh, I can. Take a little bit of Moonstruck, right? I bake bread, and I sweat, and I shovel dough out of the stinking hole in the wall, and then take a little bit of Vampire's Kiss, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Combine them together, and you get some crazy Bender monologue energy.
I mean, like,
different movie,
the energy,
but boy, that'd be fun.
Yeah, the energy would be, it would almost be Trainwreck fascinating to witness the Nicolas Cage energy in that scene. It's just like, you would remember it, but not necessarily for the reasons that the director would want. But yeah, no, I absolutely would watch that film. I'm not sure it would have the same staying power, but then again, it's the the rose-colored glasses. Ultimately, like, you know, we can't know what that film's going to be like because that was not the film that was made.
Yeah, for a lot of people, this was their peak, right? Like, Cage has had a whole career. I mean, Ringwald never rose to this height again. Nelson did, what was that lawyer movie he did? From the Hip, and then appeared on Suddenly Susan for, you know, a couple of seasons. But they never quite reached this. I mean, New Jack City, but nothing was quite like this, you know? Anthony Michael Hall, you kind of say the same thing. It was only so for, you know, Estevez to have a career after that, Sheedy. Yeah, but I mean, basically what I'm saying is, without the Breakfast Club, Cage just kept working, working. And still today, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, arguably you could say that the most recognizable name out of the members of the Breakfast Club, you know, 5 years after this film, was probably Emilio Estevez, just because he went and did Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
And yeah, so that's weird. Weird to think about.
I mean, they all did St. Elmo's Fire practically, a couple of them, and they all stuck with you know, Hughes to do Weird Science and Pretty in Pink, but never quite this height again, I don't think. Than they did in the 80s.
Yeah, it seems as though mid-80s Hughes is, you know, some of their, what a lot of people would consider peak from them, and, you know, not necessarily because we're saying that they themselves peaked. It's just for whatever reason this film has been such a draw for everyone that it's like, oh no, this is the best from them.
Pretty impressive considering John Hughes came from National Lampoon, which was kind of a edgy, you know, comedy force. Yeah. To really sort of get down with what teenagers think, you know, situations that would move them, and a lot of female-led stories from him as well. You know, from 16 Candles to Pretty in Pink, and so I was pretty impressed that he made that transition. You know, he probably just came in with here's whatever, and then when it got to be, well, now you're in charge. Okay, well, I have these thoughts I want to get across, these stories I want to tell, and when he tapped into the teen angst, he hit a gold mine.
Yeah, I mean, the guy just seemed to be able to write that. Teen, and to some extent a little younger as well. I mean, yeah, he did Home Alone, you know, and you mentioned Pretty in Pink, Ferris Day Off, Uncle Buck, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, the guy just seemed to understand that, you know, that era of adolescence and writing to that, and was able to really, you know, really get a lot of people's nostalgia. Actually, like, you know, so it's quite incredible what that guy was able to do. Now, I guess one thing that I will mention, and specifically because of the whole premise of this, really the only thing that I thought of during my watch of this film that would be, you know what, I don't see it being done exactly the same way. The sexual harassment by Bender, like, I feel like that is perfectly, like, within the world of the film. You know, it is what that character would do, and obviously as we went through, as we mentioned before, you really start to understand why he's acting the way he is. However, twice during the film they do use a slur for a gay person, and it is also spray painted on a locker. And, you know, spray painted on the locker, yeah, I can see that, especially given when the film is set and everything. Like, okay, that absolutely would be something that could have been spray painted then. But when they both times say the word in the film, like, it really does seem just mean-spirited for no reason, which again, most people could argue that is how it was used back then, but I do feel like that was that's something I do not feel holds up. Like, that's kind of the one thing in this film I didn't think held up to a rewatch, especially now. And maybe it's just because I feel like if it was done now, it would be done a bit smarter rather than just being, a slur. That's used. But,
they would just not do it at all, I think. And I think anyone involved in it probably regrets it if Hughes were alive. I think he'd say the same. That's a great place where there's been growth, is the acceptance of gay people across the board. I mean, in huge ways and massive advancements. So, yeah, I think everyone would probably say, we regret that. We'll just take the insult out of it and use. I can't remember the second 2 times it was used. I remember written on the locker. Yeah, I don't know if the others were used as an insult, but if it was, they'd just find another word, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was, one of them is said by Andrew, and the other one, I can't remember if the other one is also Andrew or if it is Bender. And if it's from Bender, I think it's him saying something that his dad says, and I think the second, it's either Bender saying something his dad said, or it's Andrew saying something his dad said. Like it's during that type of thing. Which
maybe they wouldn't take that back. Maybe they want to show the grotesqueness of adults in that film.
And that's the thing. Like that instance as well, I could see. You know what? That is something that a parent of that age at that time, that would have been said. However, the time that Andrew said it, he does flat out just call, I think it's Bender, that word. And
I think I remember it now. Yeah, and they would probably change that.
Yeah.
Wisely. It doesn't do anything, because it doesn't have anything to do with the meaning of the word. It's simply to insult someone is to call them gay, and that's, I think, would be off the board.
Yeah, so and even just changing it to like arsehole or something like that. Like, it's an easy change, but yeah. Now, outside of that, as I said, I don't think I can point to anything that I feel, if someone were to make this film today, let's say it hadn't been made, the script landed on the desk, and it was like, we're going to make this film. I can't think of anything else that would need to change. I mean...
well, I can tell you what would be called out if they didn't change it would be the diversity of the ethnicities of our 5 characters. Today, that would certainly be a big change that they would make. I mean, do you have to make it? No, but it would happen. You count on it.
And the question would be... really, it would depend on when the film is set. Because if it was set in the mid '80s at that time with those people, theoretically,
let's not forget that this. I mean, I lived in Chicago for 4 years. Evanston and some of those areas, they're pretty white. Like, they weren't even doing a disservice to that area then. Just by having all white kids. I mean, that's just what was. Yeah. Probably still is. But I think, for the interest of, the strong calls for representation, they would change that up.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think, not even necessarily if we were going to go down that route and do all of this changing, but not even necessarily changing the ethnicities of the kids themselves. Because, again, it's... Sherman Oaks, Illinois, right. So it is definitely suburbia, and that sort of style thing. But maybe the principal would be the diversity cast person. Like although one thing I wish I'd done, I wrote down to do it and I never actually did it. I want to figure out what $31,000 in 1985 money is today. Because he explicitly said, like, I make $31,000 a year, and I heard that and I was like, that must be significantly more after inflation, because otherwise that's a bit of a weird flex for that
All right,
time.
I just looked it up while we're sitting here. It's the equivalent to about $98,500 today.
There you go. Yeah. So
that's pretty decent.
Yeah, so
what you say? It costs $1 million to make. You can't make $1 million movie anymore. So everything was dealing with fewer dollars.
Yeah, it's Yeah,
And
it's
it
always
took fewer
interesting
to-
looking back for that.
And it took fewer to say you had a lot of money. But I also think the stereotypes haven't changed. In many ways, they've advanced. But I think like you got basket case, sure, the rebel, the athlete, the brain, the princess. So if we made it today, I mean, you still want to include all those things. I think you'd have to deal with some stuff. Would you have to like work in school shootings? Would that? I mean, because they talk about a gun in the school. I mean, that's a huger deal now than it would have been. That there would have been arrests. There would have been like all sorts of. There would have been juvie. I mean, who knows? So like today, I mean, the gun in school would be a bigger deal.
Well, and that would be the thing as well. Like the two things that I feel like if you were to make this film today, you could not set it today. Like it wouldn't work for several reasons. I mean, number one, keeping them disconnected from the outside world, that's easily enough done. It's just they had to give up their phones. Like that's not an issue. That's
phones,
an easy one. But if there had been a flare gun that had gone off in a locker, and it was one of those people, assuming that they're not still down at the police station dealing with this, the school resource officer, which is a stupid title, yes, I said it, but there would be at least one member, like armed member of either the police force or just whatever arm of the sheriff's department handles that when they have that, like they would be at that door. Half of this film would not happen because they'd have to get past I suppose you'd have to make it a completely inept school resource officer, which would then draw backlash from people saying, well, you can't make these people seem like ineffective and so on. So yeah, I think if you made this film today, you would still have to set it when it is. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to get it made. I mean, maybe bring it to the 90s. Yeah, but
add a phone though, like you mentioned the phone. Add a phone to any of these people, and their self-image will be even more destroyed. It'll be more. The phone will make it more destructive, and they will be more wrecked as people. Can you imagine just like all the Claire stuff? But Bender snuck his phone in, so then he's gonna write Claire's a virgin. He sends it out, and everybody in school knows now. And then, or like someone makes a video. How did you get in detention? Well, someone made a video of me, Allison. And they caught me, doing the thing with the lice in her hair, and then it's like this skank, and then that goes all over. It's like, add the phones today. They were already so horribly, just angst-ridden and stressed, and have such pressure put upon them. Add the phones and forget about it. I'm so glad I didn't grow up with those.
Now that's actually something that I do find interesting. Trying to think of a more modern telling of it. I firmly believe that if they were to do let's say early 2000s, just let's bring it as far forward as we can before the phones start to become problematic. I feel like Claire would be the one with the drugs in that case, because she is the incredibly popular girl that is trying to be popular and trying to maintain her sanity.
Oh, she'd be an influencer and all this
she'd be
stuff.
self-medicating to handle the stress. So she wouldn't necessarily have marijuana or anything harder, but she absolutely would have like Adderall and stuff like that. So
we have such worse stereotypes today. I've said it 100 times, but again, brain, athlete, basket case, princess, and criminal. Now we'd have like influencer. Like all this dumb stuff. What's
instead of the princess, it would just
Elizabeth
be the
Holmes
cheerleader
type. The kid who gets out of school because her mom went to Harvard or whatever. The whole scandal with Lori Loughlin. Just to be a bunch of annoying people. Kids today, right?
Back in my day, we had real simple stereotypes. Yeah. So now we have touched on a couple of these already, but I made sure to write down the reason why each of the 5 members of the Breakfast Club are in detention on Saturday. Do you remember who did what?
Yes, I think Allison didn't do anything.
Allison did not do anything. She just didn't have anything better to do.
Right. It was the flare gun in the locker. That was Brian.
That was Brian, yep, because he was going to attempt suicide with it.
Andrew taped a kid's buns together.
Yep, Larry Lester.
Was a bully, yeah. Bender, what did Bender do? I think about it. I mean, what didn't he do? He did so much during the movie. I forget what he did. They got him in there.
Yep, he received, I think he received 8 detentions during the film. And probably more that we don't hear about. But
are you finished? No, I'm doing society a favor. So I got you for 2 weeks, Bender.
So Bender, the criminal, he pulled the fire alarm.
Oh, that's it? Okay, that came to mind, but I didn't think that would be enough. But I guess probably doesn't take much, and they want to get him in there.
I believe he is supposed to have done it. I think it was the day before. I think it was on the Friday. So do you remember what Claire did? It's only mentioned once, right at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, I can't remember, though.
She skipped school to go shopping.
Oh, that's right.
Which is actually kind of interesting, because there is a point in the film where obviously Bender is ripping into her and saying, like, the princess, the school would probably shut down if you weren't here. And it's like, right. She wasn't. She skipped school. It is a bit of an odd line if you remember that that she wasn't there for a day. So one thing I did want to ask, I now have a daughter who is starting to go to school and going through that. So, this is going to be my intro to what it's like to have someone going up through an American education. But do they do in-school detention anymore? Is that something that still exists? Because I've worked in a couple of schools, directly working in a classroom that provided services for individuals with developmental disabilities. So I was kind of outside of the regular school system, but I was still in the school. I swear detention wasn't a thing. So maybe the older classes, they are still a thing, but do you know if that is something that still happens, or is it a lot more, actually trying to provide help to the kids rather than just flat out punishing them for stuff like that?
Over the course of the last 25 years, I've had 2 dogs, so I don't know.
Okay.
I have not sent a kid through the system to know that, and I have not been a teacher myself. Chances are they don't. I bet you because, the kids probably put up some sort of stank, and said, "Oh, our rights are being." I don't know. That'd be my guess. they probably complained and got it changed.
Well, the weirdest thing that I've noticed is that it's not the kids complaining that ever changes something like that. It is the parents complaining that it's difficult for them, and then. My kid had to stay after school, but I've got these other kids, I can't pick them up. We need to find a better way of handling, that sort of thing. So, I feel like, again, yet another reason why this film couldn't be made set today is there would be no 8 hours of detention at school on a Saturday. That would not happen.
If they made it today and they said it today, I can tell the music would be a lot worse. But that's just me.
I mean, depends who they get to do it. If they got Quentin Tarantino to make the film, the music would be kick-ass regardless of what it was set.
It wouldn't be of the day. It would be a lot of Harry Nielsen stuff.
Yeah, and I will say for myself, there's only ever been 2 songs from this film that I remember. And one of them is the obvious one. Don't You Forget About Me, just instant classic for that.
Anthem, yeah, big time.
But the other one is, I believe it's called We Are Not Alone. And it's the song that they sing when they're all dancing in the library towards the end. The song plays there. That's just one that... Every time I've watched this, I get that stuck in my head more than I get Don't You Forget About Me. probably because Don't You Forget About Me, we hear more of that song.
Oh, yes.
The other song I think we hear about 40 seconds of, and then it just goes on to the next scene.
In Los Angeles, some of the biggest stations are 101.1, which plays oldies, which now this is an oldie. And I think like Chuck Berry, but no, that was an oldie in the 80s because it was from the 50s. But now, from today, the 80s is oldies. So it plays there. 103.5 is like soft, rock, and so they play that. 93.1 is the computer Jack FM sort of commercialist, DJ-less, I should say. They play commercials. DJ-less music station. They'll play it. So it plays on every station. The classic rock station will even play it, in and amongst Zeppelin and Van Halen and stuff. So that song is played perhaps too much nowadays. More than it was back then, it seems.
Yeah. It is weird how human brains are kind of not designed to acknowledge the passing of time in some respects. So, for instance, taking Back to the Future as a good benchmark, if Marty McFly left this year and went back the same number of years he went back to go to 1955, he would arrive in 1993.
I know. Crazy, right?
Like, what happened? How did I get so old?
When George Lucas made American Graffiti, he went back to 62, which was like 9 years. So if we wanted to make a throwback movie about the old days that are crazy, it'd be like...
That'd be 2014.
2014. Wow.
Yeah. Those...
We'd have nothing interesting to...
Halcyon days of 2014.
Yes. Remember? Yeah. I'll tell you one thing I would not be surprised if they made this today was they'd probably make it a series. And I could tell you we wouldn't need a series. I think way too many shows are series when they don't need to be. It's like you needed 8 hours to tell it. You watch a really good movie and they just get everything across in 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And you're like, that was good. I'm full. I'm good. But some of these ones, I don't want to say names, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, they could really trim them down, and people have now famously as well started editing these things down into like 2 hour of really just all the important stuff you need to know. So I just fear if they made this, it would be a series. There would be, for 1 8 hour session, like each hour would be a show, and it would be like an 8 hour thing, and it would just drag on.
Well, that actually is something that I always find interesting talking to people about, because when you say the word series, in America, a series of a show is typically like if it was a cable television show and it was going to be a big show that they were putting on, it would be 20-ish, give or take, episodes of 42 minutes of actual episode and then ads to fill the hour slot, and that would be one whole series. So that's an insane amount of time. Like that's and even 10 episodes is a lot. Whereas in England, one series typically, barring any like big money going into it, a series of something is typically 6 episodes.
Yeah, we're doing that now.
Yeah.
The Last of Us, I think, was 8.
Yeah, so really condensing it down to what actually makes sense. Because one thing that I like to point out just how bad it got was there was a TV show called Being Human, and so it was in the UK. It ran for 4 seasons. I believe they did 8 episodes instead of 6 for a couple of the seasons, but it was still a really condensed plot. Each episode was 1 hour, no ads because it was on BBC, and so it was. The first series was 6 hours long. It started at point X and it ended at point Y. The American version of it was 23 episodes. Each episode was 42 minutes of plot, 42 minutes of actual action. I won't say plot because it started episode 1 at point X and it finished episode 23 at point Y. the exact same plot points is where it started and finished. And
it doesn't always need to be a series.
Yeah, it filled about 10 hours of nothing. So, yeah. I do think that this would be what would be considered in America a good mini-series. Yeah, actually, maybe a little bit of like a view into the actual home life of the kids. Like, obviously, have them telling it, but then we also do get some additional sort of home life moments and stuff like that. I think that it would be good. Like, even actually do a 5-episode, like a 6-episode series. The first 5 episodes are focusing entirely on each of the Breakfast Club, like their view of what's going on, and then the 6th episode is actually what we see. So, like, it's actually what happened. So you see everyone's perspective on their time.
That might be good.
Yeah.
I could tell you if it's a film today, though, no one would watch it.
Oh, no.
I mean, in this franchise-centric movie calendar, you know, between Fast X and John Wick and Mission Impossible and The Flash and, you know, Spider-Man and The Haunted Mansion and Indiana Jones, and all, no one would watch The Breakfast Club. That's, I mean, it would have to go to series just so it would get watched, because that's the only place they watch things like this that take time and your attention to enjoy.
Well, that's the thing. Now, I personally feel I have the answer to this question, and so I'm going to ask you now. If this was made today, regardless of when it's set, you know, just if someone were to have this script and make it, which director would make it?
I'd love to see Richard Linklater make it.
That could be interesting. I could see that.
Be a different vibe, but
well.
he's handled kids before, Dazed and Confused. Everybody wants them.
Yeah.
You know, that'd be cool.
I can give you who I personally believe would be the best modern fit for this film if it were to be made today.
I don't think I'm going to come up with anything better than Linklater. So what do you got?
I would say Kevin Smith.
Oh yeah,
I think he would crush a version of The Breakfast Club. It would definitely be an R-rated film.
Yeah.
But
I mean, so is this one, but yeah.
But the dialogue, like, it would be just as tight, if not tighter, than the John Hughes.
He's got to cut the crap though and really hit us with the heart though, because it's the heart and all these monologues and things that really levels out all the crudeness and everything else into a nice package.
I would argue that Kevin Smith now would easily be able to do that. Kevin Smith at Clerks and Mallrats, probably not. No, but yeah, Kevin Smith now, I feel he absolutely would be able to do it. I mean, I recently watched Clerks 3, and I can understand why some people don't like it, but I feel that it really shows like he's taken all of the stuff he's learned from his other films and has made the best cap to the Clerks story, and made some good choices without going into spoiler territory. But yeah, I'd say I didn't have anything else written down to go over. I feel like we've covered the vast majority of what I was hoping we would. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we start signing off here?
No, if you haven't seen this, please do. I mean, obviously you probably have if you're listening to this by now, or you wouldn't have known what we're talking about the last hour.
Very true.
But this is a step up from Animal House, from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which played a little more. Even his own 16 Candles, which all had a lot more sex jokes in them, or just exploitative scenes like Phoebe Cates taking her top off, or Molly Ringwald's character having to give her underwear to a guy, and then or Revenge of the Nerds, where there's basically a rape in it done for joke. That stuff is old and outdated then. So, but this was definitely an elevating the type of kids you're going to see on screen, not just sex star comedy characters. So, I've always welcomed that, and I've always put this at the top of my list of all those movies back then for that adult handling of teen life. Yeah,
absolutely. This is a film that has aged spectacularly well. As I mentioned, a couple of words here and there, specifically the one word that I will not say, just because I do not feel it is right for me to do so. And yeah, like aside from that, like everything in this is great. Like the acting, specifically Judd Nelson's acting, for me, just phenomenal. You really do get to understand these characters in a relatively short period of time, and yeah, I will recommend this to anyone, absolutely anyone, because
I do. I showed it. My girlfriend and I started dating during the pandemic, and we were on lockdown. Just wanted to watch movies. I showed this to her. She hadn't seen it, so I showed him like, "Hey, I bought the disc. Sat her down. Let's watch it." Did that with a lot of '80s movies with her. Parenthood. When Harry Met Sally, she hadn't seen these. I'm like, what? So we had to change that.
Well, I think that with a final recommendation for both of us, for everyone to see the film if they haven't already, which if you haven't and you've reached this point, thanks. And also, I do feel like we haven't actually spoiled the film, which is kind of an interesting thing I didn't even consider, but there's not much.
That may be true, because there's a lot of hubbub since the 80s about the finale, about who ends up with who and how that all goes down, because some people were angry, like, oh, why do you have to change to be accepted? And so that's a big deal. That's a whole other discussion, but because that has nothing to do with whether it held up or whether it could be made today. That's just some people think characters compromising themselves to be more popular was like a bad call. I think it's what it is, and it's how the story went, and I had no problem with it. But I get it.
I mean, yeah, it was. There was a little bit of the trope of the time, like films like Not Another Teen Movie expertly rip into the we need to beautify a character. Let's beautify a character in this film, and because it is a teen drama film from the mid '80s, it was going to be in there. And yeah, again, product of its time, and definitely if it were to be made today, as we said, that there would be some change to that. In fact, to be honest, I think that if it were to be made today, something that would be an interesting choice, and I think would work, is that the Andrew character would potentially come to realize that either he himself is gay or bisexual or something like that. Like there would have been some kind of awakening of that in the film rather than anything else. I think that would be a fantastic look into the things that a lot of kids are going through these days and really trying to understand that. So I think that would be a better way of handling it were it to be made today. But thankfully, that doesn't seem to be happening. Oddly, I don't know of any John Hughes film that, like, especially from this era, that I've heard any inklings of. They're going to remake this.
Yeah, like just Vacation, but he didn't direct that, but he did write it.
Right. Yeah.
But no, I mean that seems more ripe for this. But I think. Oh boy, I do not want to see that. I say if you want to take kids handling the travails of what it means to be a teen today, put it in a different setting. Don't just remake this. Let those characters live where they live, and we can revisit them when we want to.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Last thing I'll say before I actually do sign off for this one, but I would love it if there was, let's say there was another film about teens working through this, not specifically in detention or anything like that, but like some kind of school thing where these kids are going through this and they're really struggling and coming to terms with all this stuff in a similar vein or whatever, and then it's only when the parents come to pick them up that we realize they're the kids of the Breakfast Club. And it's like a last 30 seconds thing of like, oh, that's Bender, oh, that's Claire.
Twitter would spoil that well in advance of you seeing it.
Oh, absolutely. Basically, unless it was filmed in a submarine somewhere, that's gonna get spoiled, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I think that would be. I think that's the only right way to build a connection to this film with something else. Because, at this point in time, they are the parents picking up the kids. So, that's what it would be. But,
I mean, this New Yorker article, which, again, I recommend you check out if you want to talk more about this, that Molly Ringwald wrote. She was watching it with her daughter, and her daughter was not too upset about that scene I mentioned, but Molly Ringwald was struck by it and had to write this whole article about it. So, she also goes into great detail about interviewing a friend of hers who was gay, and gay people got a lot out of this movie, and she's like, this has nothing to do with being gay, and she says, no, it has people being themselves, and what's it like to struggle when you're not being seen, and all this stuff. They felt parallel emotions.
Yeah.
When even that specific thing of being gay in high school as a teen were being directly addressed, but it was still enough for some people to champion this film.
Yeah, I mean, there's many times during each character's monologues where the core theme is the fact that they are so stuck struggling against what they feel everyone else is telling them they should be.
Right.
And, the parents not listening to them and just being like, this is what I expect. Especially, Andrew's dad. Be like, you will be a winner. You will do this stuff. And it's like,
win.
Yeah. And, that guy's dad absolutely would, if it turns out he was gay, he could never bring that home,
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
So, it's, there's absolutely, I can see why this film has lasted so long with everyone and will continue to find an audience, just because, who at some point in time has not felt that they were unable to express themselves in some kind of social setting, or pushing against peer pressure and all of this sort of stuff like that. You will identify with at least one character at some point in the film. It's gonna happen.
Not avoid. Yeah.
All right. After that, I think that's a great place to jump off. So, one more time, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a blast, as it was last time as well. So, if you would like people to find you, I'm assuming you would, where can they do so? And if you want to go into a little bit more detail about those other podcasts, feel free.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out again, because it had been, pre-pandemic that I was on with to talk about.
I think it was 2019.
Yeah, so there you go, just before.
Yeah.
So we should have been doing more of this when you couldn't leave the house. But anyway, happy to do it again. And if you want to know more about what we're doing at the Movie Guys, watch you can go listen to the Ford Fiesta. We watch every Harrison Ford movie and do cover one per episode. My partner in crime at the Movie Guys, Adam Witt, and I break it down. It's one of the shows I'm proudest of that we've ever done, and we've been podcasting since 2009. But this show combines great, funny writing. We recap the movies in a funny way. We have great guests. We could do deep dives on all the facts. I appreciate all the stuff you did today. I go on podcasts. We're just going to hang out and talk. Okay, no. You looked up The Breakfast Club. You looked at alternative casting, stories from the shoot, all that kind of stuff. I love that. And with each of our movies we cover on Harrison Ford, we go deep on everything about, because basically in the 70s was Spielberg and Coppola, Lucas and Coppola versus the world. No one wanted them to make these amazing movies they made. The Universal didn't believe in American Graffiti, even after winning money even after winning gold with The Godfather. Coppola couldn't get Apocalypse Now made, but it was enough money he made to help Lucas make Star Wars, which no studio would get behind. Harrison Ford was in all of these. And so they're just fascinating stories. And I think if you went over there and checked that out, plus there's like 7 movies before American Graffiti that Harrison Ford was in. Like, what are those movies? We talk about them. We get you excited to see them. It's the most fun you can have with movies you've never heard of when it comes to those first episodes of the show. But we just posted Temple of Doom, and we're going to keep moving right on through, we've been saying Call of the Wild, but now we'll work our way all the way through the Dial of Destiny when that opens as well, and it ends up by the time we get to it, home viewing, I'm sure. And so everything you can find we're doing at themovieguys.net, at The Movie Guys, everywhere on social. Join us and we'll talk movies.
All right. Well, once more, yes, thank you very much for coming on. It's always great talking with you. And if anyone listening would like to connect with myself and with the podcast, just search Blockbusters everywhere, and then make sure that you tell Google that no, you didn't mean Blockbusters, you meant Blockbusters, and then you'll find us. I am very excited to continue down this rabbit hole of nostalgic rewatches and just seeing how these things hold up, and potentially, if you would like, you could come back on and we'll talk Blazing Saddles. I feel like that could be a
Airplane's another one that's one of the funniest movies ever made, but so many jokes in there are wrong. But wrong isn't necessarily bad. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear.
Absolutely. I think that definitely, early 80s and around that era, there's just so much that everyone loved at the time. But if we do go back and we watch it now, and it's that little level of uncomfortable. That's what I want to unpack in these. So I think that I think it's going to be fun. So thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you one last time, Paul, for coming on. And I will see you guys all next time. Bye.
Farewell.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.